Let me talk a little bit about this new report in the Daily Wire. I first heard about this story in local news here in Washington, D.C., by the way, and had one of those moments. You see a news story and you think, why does this seem to be getting buried? Well, fast forward, this is F-17. The Daily Wire is reporting today, Washington, D.C. police on Sunday arrested a man with hundreds of explosive devices outside a church holding a mass in honor of the Supreme Court. The man had a manifesto that suggested he was targeting the Supreme Court and Catholics, according to court papers obtained by the Daily Wire. Louis Jerry, a 41-year-old from Arizona and New Jersey, was apprehended outside the Cathedral of St. Matthew the Apostle. It's a beautiful, beautiful cathedral on October 5th, the same day the church held its annual Red Mass, in which a cardinal prays for the High Court as it embarks on a new term, and which is historically attended by justices. I think last year there were 3 justices at this Mass. So just to pause, we already talked today about Jay Jones in Virginia, who texted 3 years ago these absolutely insane, unhinged thoughts about Republicans, where he, according to the Washington Post, quote, imagined killing the GOP Speaker of the Virginia House of Delegates and discussed urinating on the future graves of other Republicans. Now, amidst no major Democrat, again, according to the Washington Post, they say, this is no prominent Democrats, it's a quote, no prominent elected Democrat has called on Jones to leave the race. This Daily Wire story, we know if this was not an ostensibly at least, from the reporting and evidence that's been released so far, if this was not what appeared to be an anti-Catholic, anti-conservative, because obviously the Catholic justices are largely conservative justices, that overlap is baked into a lot of the criticism, if not most of the criticism that they get. We know that. This story would be massive. This is certainly not a local crime story. But in the wake of what happened to Charlie Kirk just about a month ago, what date is it? Yep, October 8th. So we're still within the first month after Charlie Kirk's assassination. You have a man with explosives that were fully functional, according to reporting, fully functional explosives in a crowded area of downtown Washington, D.C. at a cathedral, saying he was going to commit an act of anti-Catholic terrorism. And this is barely a blip on the radar of the media, a blip on the radar of the media. I'm not saying this should be the biggest story in the world, but I'm just saying in the context of this big national conversation that everybody said it was time to have within the hours of what happened to Charlie Kirk, a lot of the people, particularly people on the left, but let's just say particularly people on the left, should be thinking very hard about this story. And I'm not somebody, again, who comes from the perspective that this is only happening from the left. I'm disappointed with the media coverage that suggests, often downplays and uses BS studies, as we talked about with Rachel and Inez last week, to pin this more on conservatives. I'm not even somebody that is trying to get bogged down into this competition about who is more violent. But most of the high-profile acts of terrorism or attempted terrorism, political violence in the last couple of years that have been downplayed by the media have come from the left, And I'm not saying that's everything. But I am saying this story, we all know it in our hearts. We all know it. It would be wall-to-wall coverage of this story, which, again, I'm not suggesting is the most important story in the country, but it would be treated as the most important story in the country if this were not ostensibly an act of anti-Catholic, anti-conservative violence. And this stuff is obviously very frightening. If it were looking like it was targeting the liberal justices, it would be very frightening. It's very frightening. And so it's so hard to have this conversation when one side who has power over most of the mass media, as we were discussing in Gallup, cultural power over most of the mass media. I think we could have conversations about where the media's bias is when it comes to economics and foreign policy. I certainly agree with a lot of people on the left that the media has biases that line up with the kind of political establishment and even with Republicans when it comes to hawkish foreign policy and economics. But On cultural issues, we all pretty much understand that the media's bias goes in one direction, and the mass media is losing its power to independent media, no question about it, but it's still very powerful. And that's what makes it extremely difficult to have this conversation when the very journalists and news organizations and corporate news organizations, I should add, corporations, powerful people, Democratic lawmakers are purporting to care about the rise of political violence and not pausing and reflecting and spending time talking about this as they would if the sort of ostensible ideological leaning here were reversed. And I'm going off of what we have right now. By the way, these stories do change. But again, this is pretty good evidence here in the Daily Wire story. Certainly good evidence in the case of Jay Jones. It's outrageous, and it makes the conversation almost impossible to have, because if you're a conservative, you are constantly going to be up against that. And it just, again, in order to even talk about political violence, you have to get over the hump of how we perceive it as a country. And the metaphor that I always use is like the media is our glass, like it's the window into public affairs. And if the window is smudged and cracked, depending on where you're looking through it, you're going to see, or even say it's like a glass divider at a zoo. If the glass divider is smudged and cracked, you're going to see the red parrot behind the glass divider in a very different way, depending on where you're peering through the glass. And so if we can't all be on the same page about what's actually happening, and one side of the aisle, which has plenty of its own problems, but on the question of political violence, constantly feels like the other side is downplaying, which of course people on the left feel like what happened in Minnesota were downplayed and all of that. But these examples by the power brokers in mass media are obviously being downplayed in one direction. And so it makes it impossible to even have this conversation with consensus. And I find that very, very frustrating. I find it very frustrating this Daily Wire report isn't getting more attention. I find it very frustrating the story itself isn't getting more attention, because it's horrifying. It was close to a massive tragedy at a historic cathedral in downtown Washington. I would say about a mile north of the White House. I used to live right around the corner from it, actually. It's a beautiful, leafy neighborhood in Northwest Washington that came so close to mass tragedy. And we are teetering on the brink here. Everyone felt that when Charlie Kirk had erupted in blood in front of the entire country less than a month ago. Everyone felt that. And think about how close we just came to another possible breaking point event in American politics and culture. So again, just very, very frustrating that these stories are sort of needlessly downplayed. And I think it makes this is like a sort of tough love thing for friends of mine who are in mass media or on the left. I'm happy to have these conversations. They're really difficult ones. And I don't think everyone is getting everything 100% right. Certainly not me, but it's so frustrating to see dramatic, significant stories like this one just get downplayed and get so little attention. Recently, I learned about colostrum. Have you learned about it? It is the very first milk known as liquid gold. If you listen to the show a lot, you probably thought I was going to say that in a Trump voice because I did it that way the first time and now I feel trapped. So I pivoted there. But it's known as liquid gold that babies receive from their mothers after birth, packed with proteins, natural growth factors, antimicrobial peptides that work to enhance your immune response, reduce inflammation, repair, and balance gut lining, reduce bloating, and make your hair and skin look amazing. Today's sponsor, Cowboy Colostrum, offers the highest quality cow colostrum available in the U.S., 100% made in America from 100% American grass-fed cows. Don't you love that? They don't overprocess or strip their colostrum, leaving it whole, full fat, and high protein for ultimate nutrient density. It's the highest quality bovine colostrum you can buy. Highest quality bovine you can buy. Cowboy is easy to drink. It's great, made with natural, delicious ingredients and no artificial flavors. Simply add a 3-gram scoop of either their chocolate, Madagascar vanilla, or strawberry into your coffee or smoothie. Personally, I love the strawberry, and I love it with milk. So for a limited time, our listeners get up to 25% off their entire order. Just head to cowboycolostrum.com/afterparty and use code afterparty at checkout. That's 25% off when you use code afterparty at cowboycolostrum.com/afterparty. After you purchase, they will ask you where you heard about them. So please support our show and tell them our show sent you.